Yo, welcome back to another episode of the hit new YouTube show, Fantasy Football Malpractice, brought to you by RazzBowl. I'm Dr. Donkey Teeth, and my normal doctor co-host, the Boof, is busy tonight, but we've got two stand-ins here. One is a medical professional, actually, and he has fantasy malpractice. You have fantasy malpractice insurance, Aaron?
Actual malpractice insurance.
No fantasy malpractice
No.
insurance. Aaron Pags, he's a new writer for RazzBowl and RazzBall. I keep getting the two mixed up. And we got Blair everywhere. Blair, we're the two newest writers for RazzBall Fantasy Football. Very exciting stuff. I'm excited to see all the content you guys bring out. Impressed with the early returns from you two. Blair, what's happening, man?
Not much. Happy to be here. This is my first podcast, and I'm super happy to be on the internet and YouTubes and the Twitter machines. Thank you.
Yeah, and you're a doctor too.
Yes, I'm a PhD in Japanese history, so I'm not that kind of doctor, but I can, put a Band-Aid on pretty well.
I'd trust you to fix me up.
Thanks.
So today on today's show without the booth, we're going to be talking about a little bit of news with Cam Newton signing with the Patriots, and then we're going to dive in on the RazzBowl. Both of you, all three of us participated last year, and with the varying degrees of success, Aaron being the best and Blair being the worst. But we'll dive in on that and a little bit of strategy talk about maybe where we're going to go with this year's draft. Maybe we'll divulge some of our secrets. Don't know if they're going to be good secrets or bad secrets. But let's start out with the big news from this week. We got Cam Newton signing with the Patriots. Let's kick it over to Aaron first. What are your thoughts on this signing? Are you interested in him? Where would you pull the trigger on him? Yada, yada, yada. What are you thinking?
Yeah, well, everyone's got an opinion on Cam Newton. Everyone has always had an opinion on Cam Newton since his days in Auburn and with the Panthers. Here I am in Charleston, South Carolina. We claim the Panthers as ours, even though they play up at Charlotte. I see this as a true quarterback competition still in New England, except probably not between the two players that you're thinking. You're probably thinking Jarrett Stidham versus Cam Newton. I'm thinking Cam Newton versus Cam Newton. Is it going to be healthy Cam? Because if it's healthy Cam, he's going to get the job. Okay. And, everyone's kind of trying to drive home this Cam injury prone kind of narrative. But in the last 8 seasons prior to last year, the 8 seasons prior to that, he only missed 5 games total in the first 8 years of his career. And when you're looking at like offensive snaps played percentage wise for his team, 99, 99, 84, 98, 92, 99, 84. Okay, this guy was always on the field. Despite his little nagging injuries, he was out there. We know how good Cam Newton can be. He finished top 3, top 4 quarterback 5 times in those 8 seasons. He's an incredible athlete. He's somebody I want on my fantasy team if healthy. And Bill Belichick's going to let us know if he's healthy, because if he's named the starter, he's healthy.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, he looked horrible at the start of last year, but we all know that he was a shell of his former self. Yeah, I really don't know what to make of it. I don't know where he's going to be drafted or where I would pull the trigger. I really haven't solidified much of a thought on the situation other than the Patriots are interested. I'm interested, but it's a risky proposition. Blair, what are you thinking on this?
In terms of real life football, I think it's a really interesting story. We keep hearing about how Cam got brought in for basically the veteran minimum with an incentive-laden deal. Ultimately, I agree with Aaron. We're going to be looking at whether Cam's healthy, whether he's not healthy. I think there's something very telling in that his old coach, Ron Rivera, going to Washington, brought Kyle Allen to Washington, but what we're not quite seeing is any movement to try and get Cam Newton there. Ultimately, I think what's going to be just telling is the preseason. For fantasy, I'm not going to be taking Cam in any leagues unless it's, as my deep second, third quarterback. I saw when he signed with the Patriots, a lot of people went out and got him right away, basically as their QB2. Right now, I want to see evidence. There's a lot of good QBs out there for fantasy in 2020, and I'm not going to be jumping the gun on Cam quite yet.
Yeah, if you were in the middle of a draft, it was a great time to snag him. I don't really know. Have either of you guys seen a mock draft or a real draft that's happened in the past couple days, like where he's gone?
I'm in the middle of a Scott Fish Bowl mock right now, and I think we hit round 5. Quarterbacks are starting to thin out a little bit. Of course, it's a little more of a quarterback-heavy super flex type league. I would imagine I see Cam Newton drafted here in the next round or 2. I don't think he's much further down the board than the quarterbacks that we're talking about when we see like the Goffs or the Bradys. Like how much further behind Goff and Brady is starting Cam Newton? I don't think he's that far behind.
Yeah, I think I would prefer. I'm pretty high on Brady this year, to be honest. I feel like Brady's going to be out to prove something. He's got Gronk back. He's got all those weapons. And you look at Cam Newton, you got Julian Edelman and some running backs to throw to, and Mohamed Sanu. I guess Harry could turn into what everybody had hoped Harry was going to be. I guess there's some upside there, but there's just so much more downside with Cam. You brought up the injury yourself, but also with that offense is just, it's not super inspiring to me. I think I'm more in not that you said that you were going to be drafting him, Aaron, but I think I'm in Blair's camp as far as wait and see. I just don't see that. There's so many good quarterbacks this year, so it'll be an entertaining story. I'm not going to doubt the guy. I feel like he's that type of guy that is going to really have a fire lit to prove everybody wrong kind of thing. But not somebody that I'm really going to be going out to draft. And yeah, in a super flex league, there is a little bit more incentive to get that kind of upside out of your QB2, I guess. I don't know, round 5 in your draft, like what quarterbacks are going off the board right now in the super flex league?
Yeah, like I said, we just saw like a Stafford, Brady, Goff kind of run
Those
there.
guys just went. Gotcha.
Yeah, those guys are just starting to fall off the board. So now, next in line, the Daniel Joneses, the those types of guys who are more unproven, younger quarterbacks with maybe some upside or had a down year, like a Baker Mayfield type, somewhere around there. I think that's the pool where you'll be looking at Cam Newton. And it sounds like at least the two of you guys are going to be completely out on Cam then, because there's going to be someone in most leagues who say, wow, okay, I've waited on my quarterback and I'm taking Cam.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. And the other thing that I will say is, you don't want to bet against the Patriots, but we've also seen them, they'll go to the scrap heap and they'll get a guy cheap and they'll give him their chance and they'll cut bait really quick. We've seen it happen plenty of times. Every failed wide receiver ends up in New England, and it seems like at least 50% of the time they end up getting cut. I go back to thinking like Michael Floyd. There's just a bunch of them that aren't coming to mind right now. Obviously Antonio Brown, but he would have worked out, if he hadn't been Antonio Brown last year.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think that covers it for Cam Newton. You guys have both written RazzBowl articles, though, which is kind of why I wanted to have you on. We're planning to talk a little bit of RazzBowl strategy this week, and Boof had a tight schedule, and it just happened to work out that both of you were available and actually writing and thinking about RazzBowl. You were both two of the more active people talking about RazzBowl last year, and I'm glad to have you on board now to discuss it, because you've clearly put a lot of thought into this format, which is a crazy format. Just going to give a little bit of a recap on how the RazzBowl works in case somebody has just stumbled across this and is hearing about the RazzBowl for the first time. You can still sign up for the RazzBowl. There's a fan lottery. There's going to be about 3-to-1 industry analyst to fan participation in this event. They're 12-team leagues. It is a best ball format for the regular season, and then you start setting your lineup if you make it to the playoffs. So 6 teams from each league will advance onto the playoffs, and that's at week 9. 6 teams will get cut, the bottom 6 in the standings. The top 3 from each league move into a championship bracket. The next 3 move into a wild card bracket. So the rosters, it's a single QB league. So what makes it better ball versus best ball? Okay, so there's a better ball format. God, there's just so much to explain about this contest. What makes it better ball is you get $10 of fab. Standard best ball, you don't get any fab. Your roster is your roster, and the computer will set your lineup for the entire season. With better ball, you get $10 fab. You can only use it for the first 9 weeks in the regular season. You have to spend $1 on any pickups, a minimum of $1. You can use all of it at once. So that's just another wrinkle that has been added in to allow you to cycle through some dead roster spots. Full PPR league. I don't know, guys. Is there anything I'm forgetting here? You guys are like the RazzBowl experts. Every time I explain it, I feel like an idiot because there's just so much going on. Aaron, am I missing anything here?
Well, I mean, everything you've said should lead somebody to believe this is a very draft-centric contest. Limited moves, big rosters. You have a second flex, and 3 wide receivers, which really diminishes the waiver pool. Blair, what did you find interesting that was different in RazzBowl, the original?
I am a preparer when it comes to the draft. There's a lot of people who just go into the draft and they wing it and they say, hey, I'm just going to work the waiver wire. I've seen them work their magic and I've seen them win. It's not going to work for RazzBowl. You've got a limited amount of money and you're competing against some very good talents who are all bidding on that because you get $10 for 9 weeks of free agent acquisition budget. If you overspend it, you're done right away. But as DT has said several times, the winner last year, Mike Beers, completely forgot that he had any fab and just ran with his original best ball team. And I think that just demonstrates your preparation in the draft is absolute key and paramount. The team that you leave the draft with is going to be the best team that you can have. And if you're using that fab, it's basically patching up holes before your ship sinks.
Blair, you wrote an article about the success stories, breaking down what led to, what was it, the top 8 teams or 9 teams? How many did you break down in that article?
That one was basically accumulation of 20. I also
20.
ran what the top 3 teams, Mike Beers, Adam Ronis, and Pat Fitzmaurice. They were the 3 teams that broke the 1,600 point barrier. And basically, I looked at the average plus the standard deviation, and both the top 20 teams overall, just to give everybody who's walking into this, there were 12 leagues in the main RazzBowl. There was also a qualifier. I did not do the data mashup on the qualifier. This is the main RazzBowl. 12 leagues, so we got 12 top number 1 teams, and then I added in some number 2 teams. There were some not so great number 2 teams that ranked far below other leagues. So ultimately 20 top teams that were putting out really high numbers, basically above 1,500 points, with 3 teams breaking the 1,600 barrier. What did they do? How did they stack up their teams? And where do they allocate basically their draft capital, so to speak? Forthcoming articles also will look at the worst teams, the 11th and 12th place teams, where you could find my team last year. Because what sort of started me on this journey was realizing I'm a preparer for the draft. I started with a false assumption, and that ruined my draft.
Yeah, and sorry, I did read your article, Blair. So it was the top 20 that he broke down. I was thinking you had the teams that ended up in that championship, the final. I don't know what we end up with in the championship. Well, Aaron, you would know. How many were there with you in the finals? Because you finished 6, right?
There were 6 of us in the championship
There was
tier.
only 6 in the championship tier.
Yep.
Gotcha.
We went from 12 to 10 to 6, I think, semifinals, and 2 fell out, 5 fell out, 1 came in. It was a wild it was a wild playoff, DT. It was.
You had to make it to the end to know how it works.
Even in the end, I woke up one morning and went, wow, I made it above the line. I think I made it above the line by like 2.3 points or something on a Monday Night Football, where, I just was praying. But yeah, to give folks hope, you don't have to finish in the top 2 in your league, which is really cool about the RazzBowl, right? I finished 5th in my individual 12-team league, and I finished 6th overall. So, of course, I started in the wild card round, and I really, really had to get hot. I had to make up the points that I didn't truly score in the first 9 weeks. So those next 3 weeks were super important. My team got hot right at the right time, something that can happen, in actual football. You get hot at the right time, and all of a sudden you're in the Super Bowl, and it's like, wow, how did I get here? You wake up. I didn't have like this blown away amazing draft. My draft, when I went back and looked at it, it was like, wow, I don't, what was I even thinking when I was making some of these picks, but fell into a little bit of luck. Leonard Fournette caught almost twice as many passes as he ever had total in his career. I went double tight end early, which that was my strategy going in, was to, unlike Blair, I like to think I'm going to win like right away. Like I don't plan it out. I'm ready to win the whole thing. That's my strategy going into one of these big tournaments. So I wanted to differentiate myself right from the bat. I had the 12th pick, so I was on the wheel, and I decided that if I was going to take Travis Kelce, that I needed to come back really quickly with another tight end. And I piled Ertz on top of him. And then even later, I had a tight end in mind that I wanted, and it turned out to be Darren Waller. So I basically, with the double flex and the PPR, I basically ran out 3 tight ends that were wide receiver ones a lot of weeks, paired them with Michael Thomas. And, man, I just got super hot at the right time and made my run. It was fun.
Having taken that double tight end strategy, do you think you would do it again this year?
Wow. No, no, it wasn't that fun, to be honest. With a limited fab and ignoring running back is something that I wish I didn't do. I was scrounging to find someone. I was begging for one of my pass catching running backs, Naheem Hines or Darwin Thompson, Tony Pollard, like one of these guys to catch 3 or 4 balls every week, just so that they were going to start for me, especially on the weeks the weeks Ingram had a bye or Fournette had their bye. I had no one, man. I added every running back I could. I probably added Darrell Williams. I mean, I just added guys for $1 every chance I got, hoping, that they would be able to cover a bust week from Ingram when he didn't get in the end zone, or maybe Fournette only caught 2 passes, because he wasn't scoring touchdowns either. So it was nail biting and hard work. And, I was very fortunate that strategy paid off. But I would say that my biggest bit of advice would be to utilize that second flex. That really makes the difference in this league compared to your home leagues where you're only playing one flex. You can ignore the positions a lot longer when you're drafting. You don't have to worry about filling in your running backs and wide receivers early. If the 2 best players are 2 tight ends, that's okay. Because you're going to be able to play them most weeks. And in the better ball format, at least in the first 9 weeks, when tight ends go off, they typically go off for a touchdown or 2 on just a few catches. And so, that helped too when Ertz scored his 2 touchdowns or Waller, caught 11 balls. So I was very fortunate.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think I would take that. I mean, if you draft the right players, I always say if you draft the right players, it doesn't matter what strategy you take. If you took the right running backs in the late rounds and wide receivers in the middle rounds, you'll be totally fine. You'll win the championship if you just happen to get the right guys. But that said, it's going to be very tough to do without those stud running backs when you see you're going up against a team like Bears that's got Christian McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook and Derrick Henry. I came in last year with that type of mindset. I really faded wide receiver. I knew that it was going to be tough with it being this deep. You know, we have 20-man rosters in RazzBowl, and there's no kickers or defense. So it's pretty deep offensively. So I came in thinking, well, if I need to hit something via fab, it's going to be easier to find a wide receiver than a running back, because all running backs are, you know, the best running back that came up throughout the season was pretty much Raheem Mostert. There was a couple receivers, nothing super. I mean, DJ Chark was nice, but it's not like they were all over the place. But you could find like a wide receiver 3 here and there, guys that could fill in kind of thing. And that just wasn't the case at running back. Quarterback was surprisingly tough too. I know that there were a lot of people chasing quarterback because of the Andrew Lucks and the Big Bens, and there was a couple of other ones. But I spent 5 of my first 6 picks on running backs, and there were times where I still felt like I was treading water because, well, one of them was Kerryon Johnson. Kenyon Drake was not good until he had that amazing stretch with the Cardinals. And by the time that hit, my team was already floundering. And then I had quite a bit of Darrell Henderson last year, and that didn't work out either. So I had Christian McCaffrey and Josh Jacobs, but then behind them, it was a struggle at times. And then to add on to your tight end stuff, you know, I faded tight end as well, and ended up with Trey Burton, who did nothing, and Hawkinson, who looked good early, but ended up really struggling after he came back from that injury. I hit on Will Disley in the middle of the year, and he was looking awesome. I thought he was going to carry me to the promised land, and then he got hurt. So pretty much any position can be your downfall in this. You really need to get lucky along the way, which you know, I guess that's the case in any league, but in your standard home league with a little bit shallower rosters, you're able to grind, like you said, on the wire. So Aaron's got an article coming out this week about his success that he had in RazzBowl. So we're going to be able to read about that. But Blair, why don't you tell us a little bit about the team that you drafted last year and maybe what you might do different this year?
Yeah, so I want to kind of preface this by saying I came in as a fan, and I was one of the lucky lottery winners, and I wasn't associated with any website. I've been playing fantasy sports since 2001, so I was very familiar, of course, with everything, and at the same time I wanted to really, really impress, because this was like, I mean, in my home baseball leagues, I have people who were very quietly involved with Tout Wars, and so I was like, with industry people, but never myself industry. And so this was my first time in an actual like big tournament. And so I really wanted to impress people as, you know, a fan. You know, I had 100 Twitter followers or something like that, and most of them were bots. So I started to be pretty active on the hashtag, and my principle was I wanted a really high floor, because you want that kind of what I thought was a very steady deployment of points across weeks. And that works really well for fantasy baseball. It's not going to work so well when you've got 9 weeks to make your first punch in RazzBowl, and then you switch to a head-to-head format, sort of, you know, week by week set your lineup. So when I was going for that high floor, I really aimed at quarterbacks. And I wrote a previous article where I had put in my data, and I really wanted Russell Wilson. And instead of Russell Wilson, I chose Andrew Luck, because suddenly I thought I was better than my own projections. And I choose Andrew Luck, and I'm looking, I got him in the 6th round. I went really early. He retires. And not only that, I wanted to guarantee that high floor. I picked Jared Goff in the 10th round. So in my first 10 picks, I had 2 quarterbacks, because I was so focused on getting that touchdown bonus that RazzBowl has, because quarterbacks get 6 points instead of 4 points, which is pretty industry standard. So I was aiming for those touchdowns. That carried over into my other positions too. I was no longer looking primarily for playing time. I was no longer looking to maximize roster space. I was looking for touchdown. And I ended up looking right now, round 7, I picked Will Fuller. Round 8, Zay Jones. And you know why I picked him? Because at that point, he was the wide receiver that the previous year had the most red zone attempts. And he was very unsuccessful. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, maybe if he increases his success rate, touchdowns galore. No, it did not work out. Not at all. And so I remember as the RazzBowl was going through, my team's kind of sitting in that middle spot, and I'm feeling good every week. And then some injuries happen. My first round draft pick, Alvin Kamara, he gets injured. Drew Brees is injured. Nothing's going right there. Round 3, thank you, Donkey Teeth, Kerryon Johnson. Nothing going there. So my team, very shortly through the RazzBowl season, just takes a dive, and ultimately I finish 11th. I had been trying to use my fab, and here's maybe a transition. Even though I went hard on quarterbacks, I walked out of there again with Andrew Luck, Jared Goff, and Derek Carr. I had 3 quarterbacks coming out of the draft, so I still had 2 after the retirement of Andrew Luck. I spent the majority of my fab on getting Jacoby Brissett because, I'm just so infatuated with this idea that I need touchdowns and I need high quarterback points. Doesn't work out. So I kind of wasted my fab on that, and that was not a good choice. And I've changed my philosophy kind of going into this year's RazzBowl regarding fab.
Yeah, it was tough to compete if you didn't have 2 good quarterbacks, really. You could have one. You could have had Lamar Jackson and been competitive, but I kind of took the same approach to a certain extent, Blair. I went with Mahomes in the second round because of that upside. I was big on Mahomes last year. If he hadn't gotten injured, it would have worked out better. I don't know that it was a good pick still in retrospect. But then I came back because you know why it wasn't a good pick is because my league, as industry leagues tend to do, they ended up fading quarterback. It's a one QB league. Just even there is 6-point touchdowns, they still went full fade. So I came back in the 9th round, and Baker Mayfield was still there. I was pretty high on Baker last year too. That worked out great. So yeah, I spent 2 of my first 10 picks on quarterbacks. I totally faded wide receiver. My first wide receiver was Will Fuller. That was looking great for us, right, Blair? Until he had his, yearly injury. Cortland Sutton worked out. Cortland Sutton in the 8th round, but that's just so much to chase on wide receiver when you wait until the 7th round and your first one gets hurt. And there's just not a whole lot in the free agent pool. I don't know, Aaron, did you land anybody good through free agency? I got Mostert, but he didn't really help me a ton.
I don't think anyone that I spent $1 on even made my lineup. I'm pretty sure that no one I spent $1 on made my lineup. Like I said, I was scrounging for a running back to replace my bye weeks. I was pretty set at my, with running 2 tight ends in my 2 flex spots every single week. I didn't have to do these things. I had Cousins and Josh Allen, who kind of luckily were like playing off each other. Like they knew each week one of them had to have a 25-point performance, and the other one could have like their 7 or 8 point game.
They knew that your team needed them.
Exactly. So there's a lot of luck that came into play for me for sure. Despite the despite me thinking that I was going to go on this run because I wanted to differentiate from everyone.
Yeah, we all think that we're going to kill it from the start, except for Blair. I don't know, anything else that you guys want to add? I can really open it up here for anything that we've missed as far as strategy goes coming into this year. Any regrets from last year that we haven't hit on yet? Anything at all you want to talk about here?
Yeah, really quickly. I was scrolling through kind of what Blair did. I was kind of scrolling through those 5 other teams that made it to the championship tier with myself last season because I didn't really get a good chance to look at them. I was so focused on my team. I didn't really get a chance to see how they constructed their teams. And what I noticed was that them and I kind of did the same things. We took shots on wide receivers towards the end of our drafts. Mine just didn't pan out, and theirs just did. They landed AJ Brown. They landed, you know, Hollywood Brown, the Debo Samuel, or Terry McLaurin, like these types of wide receivers who were overlooked in drafts. And I was the one picking, you know, Mecole Hardman and N'Keal Harry, and that kind of swung the balance, right? Especially in the better ball format where you're not committed to playing these guys. They're going to be in your lineup when they go off. And they were, you know, those teams were very fortunate to have nailed those picks late in drafts. And I was looking at this year and seeing how many rookie wide receivers are going much earlier now. Like those picks were like from rounds 11 on. Now we're talking about a cluster of the rookie wide receivers who are in like that 9, 10, 11 round. And I'm wondering if they're going to be worth it, or if they're just as big of risk as me saying, I know N'Keal Harry's going to get it done in New England, or, you know, there's plenty of passes to go around. Sammy Watkins is going to have 1 or 2 weeks, but Mecole Hardman's going to be the guy that Mahomes looks to. You know, I wonder if there's too much fool's gold there, or if that's the kind of gold you need to strike to really, you know, get through this super challenging tournament.
Yeah, and you know, maybe it's more the case of taking those second tier type guys. You know, nobody was really excited about AJ Brown last year after he went to the Titans. I went after Andy Isabella. I took Isabella in the 15th. That didn't work out well. I took Deontay Johnson in the 18th. He had his weeks. Miles Boykin in the 19th. So I did jump in on those late rookies. I had DK Metcalf. I took him in the 12th. So that didn't work out too bad either. Maybe a little bit too much rookie for me. And then, you know, I threw Josh Gordon in there, which is another high variance guy. But, you know, this year, I'm trying to think. I don't have my rookie list.
I've got a list for you right now. Rounds 15 through 20 in current ADP. T. Higgins, Brandon Ayuk, Michael Pittman, Denzel Mims, KJ Hamler, in that order.
Yeah,
basically.
So a couple of those guys are probably going to be those league winners. You know, I like Mims a lot in that area. I think Hamler's probably a little bit too much going on in Denver. Ayuk, I'm not super excited about a guy catching passes in the 49ers offense, but there'll probably be some opportunity. The thing that we've talked about on past shows, though, is this potential COVID stunt for rookie wide receivers mainly. I'm not as concerned about the running backs, but the receivers, you know, they always start a little bit slow. It takes some time to learn the playbook and the offense and all that. So maybe this is just the year to totally avoid. If you want to take a shot in the, you know, 15th, 16th round on a couple of them, why the hell not? What are you passing up there, right?
No, I completely agree. I think the big question is, what about the Lambs, the Judys, the Jeffersons, the Ruggs, the Riegers, these guys who you're going to have to pay a 9th round draft pick for? Would you rather be grabbing the Crowders, the Tates, these boring PPR guys? I'm going to err on the side of boring, and then just stab at T. Higgins or whomever at the end if I'm going to go rookie. That's going to be my strategy.
Yeah, and I think it kind of depends how you've built your roster up to that point too. You know, I've seen Jefferson and Rager fall a little bit at time. I mean, you never know what's going to happen in your draft. Maybe everybody's thinking the same thing, and these guys start to slide as we get a little bit further. I mean, we've only got a couple weeks until the drafts, but also what'll happen is these Scott Fishbowl drafts will happen, and it'll kind of set a benchmark and affect ADPs from here on out. Even though it's a league unlike any other, people are still going to look at, here's where all the wide receivers went, and it's going to shift everything. So it'll be interesting to see with the Fishbowl starting up late next week, I think it is. Blair, we've only got a few minutes left here. I'm going to kick it over to you. If you've got any final thoughts, it's cool if you don't, and we can wrap it up.
Real quick, over on RazzBowl, in my article towards the bottom, I give you basically the template of the amount of yardage that you want from your quarterback, TDs per game, yardage per rushing, which could, of course, be quarterback, running back, occasionally wide receiver, and those gadget players, and how many receptions, receiving yards, receiving TDs you want out of each player. In many ways, you can just plug and play. We're going to write a little bit more about it. We're going to talk more about it. But as you're going through mock drafts, you can always take some data from previous leagues, plug in, whether it be RazzBowl, Scott Fishbowl, or something else. Get yourself a template of what you want out of each position. It's crucial for best ball, and aim for that. And I think it makes drafting takes a load off, makes it a little bit easier. So you can take a look at that in the article. But otherwise, we got plenty more to talk about, more strategy. It's going to be fun, awesome, and especially if you're a fan, hop in on the RazzBowl.
Yeah, I'll link that article in the description. You got a little cheat sheet there from Blair at the bottom. That's that's something that I've been doing for a long time in baseball leagues, but I've never really set benchmarks and targets in football. Even though I've been playing best ball for a while, it's not something that I ever really considered with football. So I am going to steal your cheat sheet and use it to beat you this year, Blair.
Thanks.
Aaron, hey, so what are you working on right now? We know that your article, I'm going to link your new article. It's going to probably go up the same day as the show over at RazzBowl. We'll put that in the description. But what do you got going on out there? Where can people find you? And what are your plans for content coming up?
Sure. You can always find me at fantasyandframes.com. That's where I started. Shout out to Jorge Edwards. At Fantasy Triage is where you can find me on Twitter, answering your questions. Of course, it's the season to make rankings and all that. So I'm digging deep and putting my rankings together and having some fun with that.
Awesome. At Fantasy Triage. And Blair, what's your Twitter? Is it at Everywhere Blair, right?
Yep. Every single social media, Everywhere Blair.
Everywhere Blair.
Yep.
I'm at Donkey Teeth 87. This is the fantasy football malpractice show on YouTube. Go out to YouTube, hit that thumbs up thing, like us, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we'll catch you later, guys. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.